Councillor Daniel Pratt, Chair of Mid Suffolk District Council, and I will be chairing the meeting today. Firstly, just to let you know that Councillor Rowe will be joining us. His train was cancelled, so he will be on the next train. He'll be with us soon. Because we now have some representatives from the community and members of the public, I need to remind you all of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room, opposite the stairs. Water is available in the breakout area outside the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of this meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to be filmed. By entering this meeting, you are also consenting to being filmed by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Can I remind my members to speak clearly into the microphones and to not put their papers over the microphones? Can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Teresa Davis, Councillor Janet Pearson and Councillor Ollie Walters.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest by councillors. Councillor Stringer, what would you have to declare?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got an interest in item 6. A member of my family lives on the boundary of the Area B in item 6.
Thank you. Councillor Baker?
Same section. I'm a resident of both areas.
Thank you. And Councillor Lay?
Item 7, Director of Gateway 14.
Thank you. Councillor Wiltshire?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a resident of item 6.
Thank you. Any more declarations? Councillor Scarf?
Thank you, Chair. I'm also a town councillor for Stowmarket.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn?
Thank you, Chair. For item 7, I'm a Director of Freeport East on behalf of Mid Suffolk District Council.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just leave this?
Councillor Padgett?
Thank you, Chair. Very recently, as of Monday, I am a resident of Onehouse.
Thank you. And Councillor Carter?
As Councillor Scarf is declaring his, I'm a town councillor as well, Stowmarket.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify that dispensations have been granted to all members of Stowmarket Town Council because members would have another registrable interest which would apply in this case. So I have granted dispensation to those councillors.
Item 3, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received.
Thank you. Item 4, questions by the public in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors in accordance with council procedure rules.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And item 6, so we'll move on to item 6. MC/24/5, Community Governance Review, Onehouse and Stowmarket. I would like to welcome first David Blackburn from Stowmarket Town Council and Joanne Copping from Onehouse Parish Council to the meeting for this item. Before I invite Councillor Marriott to introduce the reports, I would first like to set out detail in how I'll be dealing with this item tonight. Firstly, Councillor Marriott will introduce the report of the Community Governance Review Working Group and move recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 in the report. I will then seek a seconder. Then I will be inviting the representatives from Stowmarket Town Council and Onehouse to make their representations to the council before inviting questions from councillors. Questions can be directed to all three parties and officers. Once questions have finished, we will then go to debate, where councillors may speak once only and for up to 3 minutes. When the debate has finished, I will then ask Councillor Marriott to sum up her report before going to the vote. On voting, we will vote on 3.1 separately and then 3.2. If recommendation 3.2 is not carried, then I will ask the council to move one of the other recommendations in the report. I'm minded not to hold a further debate at this point unless councillors have any new points to add on the recommendation before you. I intend to put this straight to the vote. Thank you. I would like to invite Councillor Marriott on behalf of the Community Governance Review Working Group to introduce paper MC/24/5 and move to recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 in the report. Recommendations 3.1. To note the results of the recent consultation and the final recommendations of the CGRWG, Appendix A and B, and subject to paragraphs 9.4. 3.2, to make no changes to the local government boundaries between Onehouse Parish Council and Stowmarket Town Council as recommended by the CGRWG. Or 3.3, to extend the Stowmarket Town Council local government boundary into the Onehouse Parish area, moving the areas marked A, B and C in Appendix A into the Stowmarket Town Council area. Or 3.4, in recognition of Stowmarket Town Council's concerns highlighted in paragraph 4.9 below, to conduct a fresh public consultation of residents in Onehouse and Stowmarket. Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Sorry, Councillor Marriott. Thank you.
Okay. In March 2022, the Council tasked the previous Community Governance Review Working Group to undertake a district-wide review, a statutory duty the Council is advised to exercise every 10 to 15 years. Two of the requests received included proposals to amend local boundaries, where a further level of consultation was needed to meet the requirements of the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. Subsequently, a second stage to the review was conducted in 2023-24 by the current working group, comprising councillors Roland Warboys, Janet Pearson, Anders Linda and myself, Adrienne Marriott. From the initial stage 2 consultation, we made draft recommendations which were sent out in November 2023 to residents and stakeholders for their views. The consultation received a response rate of 35.79% from residents within Onehouse and 7.42% from residents within Stowmarket, totalling 848 responses. Details can be found within the consultation report in Appendix B of the Onehouse and Stowmarket Community Governance Review. The report today contains the final recommendations of the working group in Appendix A, based upon the further consultation for no change to the Onehouse and Stowmarket boundary. As representative of the current working group, I'm happy to propose the recommendations outlined in 3.1 and 3.2 of the report, and I ask for a seconder.
Yeah, I'm very happy to second you. You've done a great job of work as a presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Linders. Would you like to speak to that now, or would you like to wait until we sum up?
Am I allowed to speak now out with the debate, or how does it actually work in this regard? I'm not sure.
So you have one opportunity to speak. You can either, as the seconder, speak now, or you can reserve that right to speak until the end of the debate.
My speaking to the end, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Linder. I would now like to invite David Blackburn from Stowmarket Town Council to speak for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, members. A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to come across someone called Ben Page, who is Chief Executive of Ipsos Mori. I was involved in a public consultation with his help, and he impressed upon our team the need for the public to have trust in the fairness and impartiality of a process. If the process is right, you get reliable results and reach good decisions. In simple terms, it's not what you do, but the way that you do it. As councillors, you can't please all of the people all of the time. However, you can adopt a sound process and reach informed decisions that are fair, rational, and reasonable. I'm here to talk to you about the process used in the Community Governance Review of Stowmarket and Onehouse. But why should you listen to me on this subject? Well, before I became Town Clerk of Stowmarket, I participated in parliamentary and local government boundary reviews for over 25 years. I worked overseas with the United Nations in countries such as Bosnia and Croatia on their electoral boundaries and arrangements. I also provided expert advice on electoral matters to various bodies, including the Ministry of Justice. So what will you get from listening to me tonight? Well, I hope I will help you reach an informed decision on the matter before you. So firstly, the Green Gap. Once upon a time, there were two communities called Stowmarket and Onehouse. Representatives of the two councils met and agreed that they both wanted the same thing: to keep a green space between the two places so that they would remain separate and not merge. This all sounds very sensible. I'm sure you will agree. Proposals came forward for new housing. They would provide homes for approximately 1,000 new people on the boundary of Stowmarket and Onehouse. The properties were marketed by Bloor Homes and Hopkins Homes as being in Stowmarket. I believe the site can be shown on screen. If you just flick over, please, for me. So that is the part of Union Road that we're referring to. Now, some development is so extensive that it is obvious that it should form part of an urban area. For example, Gateway 14 was moved from Creting St. Peter to Stowmarket a few years ago for this reason. With the current review, we are faced with further large-scale development right on the edge of Stowmarket. In these circumstances, I would pose the following question to you. Do you really want to put approximately 1,000 occupiers of those new homes into one house, doubling the size of that village at a stroke, and merging Stowmarket with Onehouse by removing the green gap between the two places? This would mean that there would be no discernible boundary between Stowmarket and Onehouse. Planning policy has classified Onehouse as a secondary village unsuitable for growth but capable of taking appropriate residential infill only. Contrast this then with Stowmarket, which is the main centre of growth in mid-Suffolk, where new residents to the area will look for their schools, dentists, doctors, sports and community groups, supermarkets, entertainment, etc. The recommendation moved tonight is for this council to leave the boundary between Onehouse and Stowmarket unchanged. If approved, we will be faced with a situation where neighbours on the same road could either be in the town of Stowmarket or the village of Onehouse, depending upon where an outdated parish boundary falls. I would suggest to you this does not seem to qualify as a reasonable or rational thing to do. Secondly, I will turn to the community engagement that has taken place. A public consultation must fulfil the gunning principles on public consultation, which have been upheld in the courts, the Court of Appeal and Supreme Court. They require the proposer of a course of action to permit intelligent consideration and response to its proposals. So let's take a look at option B of the Council's consultation paper. Option B is to disagree, to decline the request for Union Road development and areas A, B and C to become part of Stowmarket and for boundaries to be moved to reflect the change. The areas stipulated within the draft recommendations will be subsequently moved into the Stowmarket town area. How is the average person supposed to understand it, and how does it promote equality of participation from the many who need communications to be in plain English and an accessible format? The members of Stowmarket Town Council believe that what took place did not constitute an effective piece of public consultation. It did not provide balanced information to the public about the two options, but merely presented option A to be rubber stamped. Returning to the point I made earlier, it's not what you do, but the way that you do it. There are two further points for you to consider. Firstly, of the 6 reasons produced to justify the recommendations, 3 of the 6 cite the paupers' graves. We do not understand this. There has never been any suggestion whatsoever from anyone that the paupers' graves should be moved from Onehouse parish. And it makes no sense to say that 1,000 new residents of a large and modern housing estate will obtain their sense of community identity from an association with an historic graveyard. Secondly, a further reason for the recommendation put forward to the public is that the county, district and parish boundaries are coterminous at the moment. I'm afraid this isn't how things work. Parishes and their boundaries are the building blocks of district wards and county divisions. They change quite regularly, and the Local Government Boundary Commission undertakes supplementary reviews to align county and district boundaries with them. If the argument to maintain coterminous arrangements was commonly applied in practice, there would never, ever be a boundary change, as boundaries would be locked forever into the same eternal pattern. Therefore, Stowmarket Town Council believes that 4 of the 6 reasons for the recommendations put to the public in the public consultation are inaccurate, irrelevant, and/or unsound. In conclusion, you will understand why Stowmarket Town Council has legitimate concerns about this review. On the other hand, Stowmarket Town Council's position has been clear and consistent throughout. The Union Road development is right next to Stowmarket. It is part of the planned extension of Stowmarket within the Stowmarket Area Action Plan. The Town Council supported the planning applications for the site. The case presented by the Town Council follows each and every point of the government guidance on boundary reviews. The Town Council's case fulfills the government criteria on reflecting community identity and providing effective and convenient local government. Therefore, Stowmarket Town Council urges you to do the right thing by redrawing the town boundary accordingly. Thank you very much indeed for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. I would now like to invite Joanne Copping from Onehouse Parish Council to speak for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Onehouse Parish. I and my fellow councillors throughout this process have maintained a dignified approach. We have endeavoured to be respectful of Stowmarket Town Council despite much provocation in the local press. It is my strong hope that whichever way this decision goes, at some point a reciprocal working relationship can return between Onehouse and Stowmarket to the benefit of all our residents. However, there are some issues that need to be aired as part of this review which may not be well received. Firstly, we feel it is appropriate to express our gratitude that the consultation has been undertaken, providing all residents the opportunity to comment. Whilst local councils clearly have the right to make decisions affecting local communities to maintain transparency and trust, some form of engagement and consultation are often prudent. Stowmarket Council, having achieved the notable Local Council Gold Award, will be well aware that there is some expectation of community engagement in achieving a higher standard of governance. Whilst we appreciate they were not bound to do so, this proposed boundary change would surely fall under the auspices of requiring that community engagement. However, Stowmarket Town Council instead objected to the consultation and have taken the stance that despite a robust review, where the working group has found in favour of no change, they will seek to take legal action should the outcome be current boundary remains in place. As a relatively new councillor, compared to some of my more long-standing colleagues, I'm shocked that this type of bullying tactic would be employed to sway the overall decision, and it is our belief that this falls far short of a gold standard council. Some public forums and consultations of Stowmarket and the surrounding areas are undertaken. Such was the case in 2017 with the Vision of Prosperity for Stowmarket. Members of the public had the opportunity to comment on the current and future prospects for Stowmarket. One area within the report which stands out, and I quote, "It is clear that people agree with us that villages should not be swallowed up by the continued expansion of Stowmarket." It goes on to say that villages should not be dependent on Stowmarket for basic services. They should be self-sufficient with the choice to visit Stowmarket for other services. We've heard how much residents of the new housing developments will be reliant on services provided by Stowmarket Town Council, and we challenge this directly. How many of the services provided by Stowmarket Town Council are funded directly through their precept, rather than being funded directly or indirectly by district or county councils? I'm no financial expert, but the schools, GP surgeries, dentists, etc. that these residents will be using are not directly funded by Stowmarket Town Council. Any additional burden to these particular services, or indeed the road infrastructure, will exist whether the boundary is changed or not. Stowmarket Town Council's budget book lists the precept for the town at just over £1.3 million, and I quote directly, "The remainder of income required to achieve a balanced budget will come from income from services." Our observation here is where any of these services are paid to use, such as sports facilities, community centres, entertainment areas such as the Regal, Food Museum or John Peel Centre, the residents of Onehouse are paying to use those facilities whilst living in the parish of Onehouse. This would be the case for all surrounding parishes and their money supporting Stowmarket no matter what their address is. Stowmarket Town Council has decreed, should the boundary remain unchanged, it will see a loss of £1 million over the next 10 years. There are two key points I would make here regarding this Stowmarket Town Clerk's statement. Firstly, this will not be a loss to Stowmarket, as they have never had these funds available to them in the first place. Furthermore, we would suggest that if precept money from these developments has been included as any part of their future financial planning, it would have been misleading to say the least, as the houses currently are not within their boundary. Secondly, Onehouse is being slated, and I quote again, "small with only a village hall to offer." We would like to counter this by acknowledging that in fact we're a growing village, which has now gone above and beyond in providing new housing provision with the addition of these two new developments. Much has been said about Onehouse Parish Council's initial objections to these developments. To that we would ask, is there a single village bordering Stowmarket, given a plan of this application of this size, that wouldn't feel trepidation at the prospect of being in this exact position and needing to defend its boundaries? It's clear that Stowmarket Town Council have form for being predatory when it comes to expansion and profiteering from its smaller neighbours. But to return to my previous point, Onehouse doesn't have a village hall, we have a community centre, along with many other facilities and areas of interest, which are also used by Stowmarket residents, such as our award-winning Pauper's Graves, which is meticulously maintained by Onehouse and its residents for the last 25 years. Our community centre has plans to increase community cohesion and bring together residents new and old. Whilst there has been a lull over recent years in public activities within Onehouse, a side effect of COVID that many areas are experiencing, with a revitalised team at the helm of both parishes and community centre, this is changing, but we can only achieve this with funding to support it. Our parish council will be seeking to use the funds raised from these new developments to support Onehouse in levelling up by providing further improvements for all of our residents and the many visitors we have. The precept for Onehouse in the current year is approximately £23,000. So if Stowmarket's quoted figure of £1 million over 10 years is accurate, there is so much we can achieve making improvements and creating new initiatives for the benefit of our residents and visitors alike. One example of this is that Onehouse is currently in discussions with both the developer and district council over the parcel of land to the north and west of the Paupers' Graves. This area is close to both housing developments on Union Road, and as such, footpath provision will be part of the design, providing safe pedestrian links between areas A, B, C and the main part of the village. Whilst the pedestrian link will not be reliant on additional funding from precept, the provision and upkeep of the additional community space will be. A point I would like to make is that there is an assumption that Onehouse residents are reliant on Stowmarket, contrary to the expectations of the vision of prosperity briefing, maintaining that this should not be so. It may have been the case some years ago when Stowmarket provided a thriving high street and market facility. I concur it remains the case for meeting the needs of our residents in NHS and educational provision, but with the current decline of the high street within the market town, sadly this is no longer the case for shopping. We only need to look at the level of traffic deserting the town on a Saturday morning for the towns of Bury St Edmunds and Ipswich to see that village residents are having to look much further afield for both banking and shopping facilities at the weekend. As some of the comments made within the boundary consultation suggest, perhaps Stowmarket Town Council would be better placed in improving the town than spending their publicly funded budget on expensive consultants and possible future litigation against this boundary review. It is interesting to note that despite the massive growth Stowmarket has recently seen, with the developments at Gateway 14, both commercial and residential development at Guncotton Way, and not to mention the new Aspen Grange estate, that they are so desperate to take yet another portion of our village away. 2014 saw Onehouse lose land to Stowmarket, along with the subsequent funding from the properties therein. I ask the question, is there a point where Stowmarket Town Council will stop the incessant rampage on neighbouring villages? Now to the consultation. 100% of all respondents within the affected areas of A, B and C requested no change, whilst in total of the whole consultation, only 17% of respondents felt that the boundary should be moved. Surely these facts, along with the working group finding that the boundary should stay as it is, suggests that the current mapping of the boundary is appropriate. How do we expect to be trusted as councillors if we engage our communities and then rule against the consultation findings? The residents of these estates are concerned over the how much the change may mean for them financially, and it's almost impossible for them to envisage what they will gain from the boundary being moved. In conclusion, Stowmarket Town Council appears to be harbouring the impression that Onehouse is a sleepy little hamlet with nothing to offer. To that we say, stop taking our residents, stop taking our funding, and watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Copping. Thank you to both of our representatives for putting forward very robust arguments on behalf of their communities. We will now move on to questions. So councillors may ask as many questions as they wish. However, they must be relevant to the subject under discussion and be a question. So let's proceed. Any questions? Councillor Winch?
Can I ask Mr. Blackburn a question? I hear the comments about the nature of the survey. Do you think if you reran it, you'd get a different result? Because the result to a layman seems quite overwhelming.
be a matter of complete conjecture. As my friend said here, the Stowmarket Town Council sought to preserve the integrity of the process. So we posted details of it, but we did not actively try and push a particular perspective on it. So we informed people it was taking place. So given that we're being encouraged to now look at actively trying to influence our electors, which is not really what we're about. If you did a different consultation and did it in a different way, and we actively engaged with the community, it is possible that you could get a different outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Having read through the comments which from the consultation, I have a couple of questions which are, do we know what proportion of the development, what proportion of final development residents aren't there, and especially the proportion of residents in the Stowmarket part of the development, and also because it comes down to kind of people worried about kind of joining up Stowmarket and Onehouse joining up further than they already are, because half of Onehouse is attached to Stowmarket now pretty much. What planning, like how does this fit in the planning framework of, if the boundary stays where it is there more potential for developers to say, well, we want to join the two bits of Onehouse, or if the boundaries move, it kind of, and keeps the strategic green boundary, does that help with what this, or is that, doesn't that really matter? Is it still there's plenty of, which one would be more likely, or which one is there more bits in the planning framework that will result in more houses? Because I don't know from reading this kind of how to address people's concerns.
Mr. Connors, would you like to respond?
Yes, certainly. So with regards to the first part, just to confirm, the question is, do we know the percentage of properties which are due to be there, which are currently occupied and therefore were surveyed? Is that the question? So what's the remaining percentage who weren't surveyed because they weren't either there or those properties are yet to be built?
Yeah, including how much of the Stowmarket?
Yeah, certainly. So I can answer that one easily. No, I don't have that information, certainly not to hand. I can find it out and report that back to you. Obviously not in time for whatever decision is being made today. With regards to the second question, that's a planning question, I'm afraid. I don't have the expertise to answer that as the Electoral Services Manager. And again, we can get planning to inform on that, but it won't. There's no one from planning here today, I think. So apologies, I'm unable to answer planning questions because that's not my area of expertise.
Councillor Penny.
I'm not sure who's best placed to answer this, but historically parish boundaries were influenced by the Christian Church. I'm just wondering whether the opinions of the Church were sought on this matter, and also historically, have there previously been any boundary changes? Thank you.
Would an officer like to respond?
Yes, sorry, Councillor. I was just confirming the answer before I stood up. So with regards to the church, obviously the church weren't specifically approached as an entity within this, but as a public consultation, they could have submitted a response if they chose to do so. And apologies, they did submit a response. So there's that. Thank you, Patrick. And please, could you ask your secondary question again? So were there any previously boundary changes? Is that the...
Yes, historically, have there been any previous?
Specifically with Onehouse and Stowmarket? Or
yeah, well, the relationship between Onehouse and Stowmarket.
Yes, it was in 2014.
Could I just add to that? In 2014, it was a proportion of the Chiltern Fields that was taken from Onehouse, moved into Stowmarket. Just add that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my first is actually a question to Mr Blackburn of the Town Council. Onehouse Parish Council have told us this evening that the Town Council have used consultants on this process. Can you confirm or deny that fact? And my second question is probably one which would be suitable for an officer. As a council, do we actually know which houses form part of each parish? Because clearly the parish boundary runs through part of B and also C on the map within the documents. Thank you.
Mr Blackburn, yes, if you could respond to the first question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I confirm that we haven't sought any legal advice or paid for that, and we haven't sought any consultancy advice as well. We haven't employed any consultants through this process during the life of the term of the last council or the year before that as well. So that is factually incorrect.
Thank you. Patrick Connors, could you respond to the second question?
Yes, certainly. Yes, we could identify specific properties that fall within the parish boundaries, and obviously we do so for the purposes of running elections, but for various other reasons, council tax and things like that. So specific properties can be identified as to where they fall. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. The question for Mr Blackburn. We have 4 recommendations in front of us today. I'm not entirely sure which of those recommendations you are asking us to approve. Is it to simply incorporate these 3 areas into the Stowmarket town area, or is it the to go back to consultation, which is the 3.4?
I think that is for council to decide. I'm presenting a case and asking you to reach an informed decision on it. Clearly, from the town council's perspective, we would like to see the whole of the Union Road development incorporated into Stowmarket and the town boundary moved. Yes, there could be some basis for doing a reconsultation over it, but I am aware that this particular topic has caused councillors a lot of angst and a lot of soul searching, and it is not an easy issue for you to deal with. So if it is being referred back to the working group and then further consultation, then that has to be a robust process, because we do not want to end up here again. We asked for this review in 2017, so it would be dealt with before the last elections, and regrettably that didn't happen. We shouldn't be here today in full council like this, either Onehouse or Stowmarket, putting our case. So we would like the clarity of a decision. And clearly from our side, we would like the decision to be, from the Stowmarket's point of view, supportive of that. And I would expect, obviously, from the chair of Onehouse Parish Council, they would like you to decide in their favour. I'm not sure I've helped you at all with that, but that's our considered opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Hicks.
So I just want real clarity. Is it 3.3 Stowmarket Town Council wants us to support, or is it 3.4? Can you just give, I know it's complicated and it's difficult, but that's what we're here for. So what is it Stowmarket Town Council wants us to support?
I haven't got the recommendations in front of me, so if that could be read from the monitoring officer, please. But it is clearly that we want the town boundary moving.
I just want to know what you want, but I want to know what.
Which one it is.
Understanding is it's 3.3, but can we just have clarity? That's what they're asking for.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify then, so recommendation 3.3 is to extend the Stowmarket Town Council local government boundary into the Onehouse parish area, moving the areas marked as A, B, C in Appendix A of the report into Stowmarket Town Centre area. Recommendation 3.4 is in recognition of Stowmarket Town Council's concerns highlighted in paragraph 4.9 in the report to conduct a fresh public consultation of residents in Onehouse and Stowmarket. Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Blackburn, would you like to answer? Thank you.
I can definitively say it's 3.3.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer?
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of bits of clarification, if I may, from David Blackburn, the clerk. You mentioned Union Road development. Do you mean, can I just have clarity on what you mean by that? Because is that all of the development on the south side of Union Road? Or does it include the development on the north side of Union Road? Because that goes back to about 1840 and is not in the lines on the maps of this review. So I just want clarity that you just mean the south side of Union Road when you say Union Road development.
Mr. Blackburn, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The focus of the review has been very much around Union Road development, but there was areas A, B and C, if you recall, that went to the public. So there's a little bit to the north of Union Road, but not all along there, just the corner. Then there's the Union Road development, and then there's the area down to the river, and that was on the diagram there.
To come back, so can you clarify that then to the north of Area B, there is some development there that's not part of what you are calling Union Road development?
That is correct, yes.
Right, thank you. One other point of clarity, if I may. When you mentioned the Stowmarket Area Action Plan, can you confirm that a percentage of what's in Area B was a reserve allocation in that Area Action Plan?
Mr. Blackburn, thank you.
My understanding was that it was a reserve site, but obviously came forward, and that's why we received the planning applications from Bloor Homes and Hopkins Homes for the site.
Thank you very much. If we have no further questions, Councillor Carter, go on.
I have a question on accessibility on the current site. And it is a question I'm trying to work out new residents moving in to this location. What current access will they have to each of the parishes? Regarding pathways, regarding access into current facilities, as in a clarification, just to actually work out which way, if they are residents are moving in there with a limited access, and they have to spend money going to facilities, how accessible is, what are they getting out of each boundary? Moving there, what are they getting out of each currently?
Joanna, would you like to answer that question?
So currently the paving that's within the estates that are being built are suitable for all accessibilities. As we move further into, as I've mentioned, having the portion of land that's to the north of Union Road, there will be a pathway that connects directly with the remainder of the village. The footpath that comes from the village down to what is at the moment Northfield View Estate is in the process of being designed, and we are hopeful that that's going to be built by the end of this year. Currently, it isn't there. But other than that, all I can say is it's coming, but it isn't there right now.
Thank you, Mrs. Copping. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both for your submissions. So this is a question for each of you to sort of answer in turn. When Cllr and Hopkins originally came to you with their plan applications, how did your planning committees vote? Were they for the development or were they against the development? Thank you.
Stowmarket Town Council supported both of the applications, but obviously made some recommendations over conditions to apply to the grant of planning consent should it be granted.
Thank you. Can I also ask Mrs. Copping to answer that question as well, please? Thank you.
Onehouse Parish Council did object to the developments being built, and for the reason that we had already seen in 2014 portions of our parish being taken by Stowmarket after a major development was being built. We were also of the mind that as a village we do value having agricultural land around us, so that was another part of the reason why the council has objected to it. That does not mean, however, that we don't welcome the residents.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Councillor Scarf?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a question to Mrs. Copping. How do Onehouse Parish Council retain now a green boundary between the town of Stowmarket and the parish of Onehouse if this proceeds?
Yes, if you could please answer that. Thank you.
As things stand at the moment, we would not have a green belt between us and Stowmarket, but the councils that made that agreement between Stowmarket and Onehouse are no longer sitting councils. We value having those houses and the fact that we have a growing community, and we are prepared to lose some of our green belt specifically for that reason. We know that we are an older village, and the possibility of bringing in new residents with families is important to us.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe?
I've got a question a bit from the about kind of what was discussed in the working group, because there's quite a lot about connections to Onehouse with Area B, but as there's part of the development where kind of to go by road, you go, like to get from part of Stowmarket, you need to go through Onehouse, and then to get to kind of Stowmarket. What discussion, like, what was the reasoning for there not being kind of any, or I suppose it also could be about who, how the report was written as well, of how, like, what was the decision to not talk about the connection for the residents of Stowmarket to Stowmarket, and the fact that that's broken up in the current boundary, because it's hard to get a sense of kind of why, like, of just what connection there is currently with the boundary without that being further explained, because I'm guessing that was discussed.
Patrick or David, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor, could you phrase the question again, because it was a bit unclear as to what the actual specific question is. Thank you.
So the bits of the Stowmarket bits of the development which aren't connected by road to the rest of Stowmarket with the current boundary, I'm wondering, there isn't any sense of what discussions there were around how that was decided to be a valid way of keeping Stowmarket connected to Stowmarket.
So this is just an electoral arrangement, so the impact is just not there.
Yes, you wanted another question?
Yeah, that doesn't really answer my question, because we have a document that talks quite a lot about how the Onehouse side of the boundary kind of connects to Onehouse and the historical links and all bits like that. But the practical connections of people living in the Stowmarket bit, I'm just wondering how you see that bit, or how you're seeing that bit connects to Stowmarket, and that is kind of part of what we need, is like that is part of how boundaries are decided, of because it's about the connection and the kind of historical context and bits like that. So it's not. So it's more about stuff. It's about stuff beyond just the electoral arrangements.
David.
So as far as this goes, it wasn't an area part of the consultation, so obviously it couldn't be taken into consideration there. But the actual villagers, the actual residents there, their arrangement is established already there. So they weren't, they were open to the consultation, open for their responses. The responses is obviously in the feedback. But the detail was of the community government tree was moving portion B, A, B, and C into Stowmarket, not the other way around.
Councillor, would you mind if you raise the point and for clarification outside of the meeting? Would that be okay?
I'm not very comfortable with that, because the part of the bit of the development is in Stowmarket, so I'm not quite sure what Patrick's talking about, to be honest, because it's about whether to keep boundary where it is going through the development. So, yeah, that is a quite important bit, I'd have thought, to this, rather than saying it wasn't included.
Please.
I think there might be a misunderstanding here, but I'm happy to go through it outside. That's not a problem.
Thank you very much. If that point could be raised and clarified after the meeting, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question really for more clarity, possibly for the working group. I'm just sort of trying to get my head around where the recommendations for this review seem to be in contrast to the recommendations for the Bold Meadow development in Coombs. To me, the circumstances seem quite similar. The proximity to the boundary and other housing, the distance from the development to the main residential area of Coombs Village, for example, led to a recommendation to change the boundary in this instance. So it seems different. So just for clarity, please.
Thank you. This sounds like a question for Patrick or David, or the working group.
Yeah, unless the working group wants to respond. So the recommendation was obviously drawn up of the responses from the consultation. The working group reviewed those responses from the consultation and as such drew up their recommendations to bring to council.
Thank you. Councillor Marriott, would you like to respond?
Well, I think in the fact of the Coombs Battisford, that was actually what the respondees wanted, whereas there wasn't any controversy about that. But obviously in the second case, between Onehouse and Stowmarket, it's more controversial.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the working group's done an awful lot of work on this, and obviously the details are in the report. But I just wonder, Councillor Marriott, if you could just give us a feel of the discussion in relation to whether areas A, B and C were to be taken separately, or separate recommendations put forward, or as your final working group's recommendations are, to group them all together. If you could just give us a feel of that, to sort of clarify that your recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Marriott, if you'd like to respond. Could you stand, please? Thank you.
Well, there is a breakdown, and perhaps Patrick can give it to you of the results from the different areas. But we were looking at them all together. I mean, we did a sort of walk around the area, and we were looking at the different characteristics of those areas, and sort of taking in the sort of types of population there. Obviously, Area C was sort of quite long established, and it was really obviously the area under consideration was really the sort of new Union Road development. So I don't think I can sort of say anything more to that other than saying with regard to the developers that in saying that those new houses were actually in Stowmarket. I mean, that hadn't been agreed at that time, so I think that was quite misleading.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. Patrick, would you like to come in?
It's important to note that when community governance requests come in, this is district-wide requests, so we asked for recommendations, requests from the towns and parishes, that all three areas were requested at once, so they were looked at as an entirety. And that's what the working group did. They looked at it in the entirety and decided it could be dealt with in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn, does that answer your question? Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Scarf?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to come back, and thank you for allowing me to do so. I'm not really sure whether it's an officer or the panel will be able to answer the question, but page 33 actually gives us the two questions that were posed to members of both parishes. Option 1 was to agree to decline the request for the Union Road development and areas A, B and C to become part of Stowmarket, and for boundaries to remain as they currently are, no change. Option 2 was disagree to decline the request for the Union Road development and areas A, B and C to become part of Stowmarket, and for boundaries to be moved to reflect the change. The areas stipulated within the draft recommendations would subsequently be moved into the Stowmarket town area. Who actually devised the questions, and do you actually think they actually make any sense to someone in terms of plain English? I may not get an answer, but I'm going to ask the question.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor, but those questions were agreed in this chamber by council, and there's been, that's my understanding, is that those questions, that report came through council with the questions for the CGR. I wasn't here back then, so apologies. And subsequently, Cllr has been sought, and there is legal intelligibility on the questions.
Councillor Scarf, if you could briefly follow up.
Yeah, well, just on a point of clarity, I don't believe those questions ever came to full council for clarity purposes. This has been stated numerous times and is factually incorrect. Someone made the decision that these were the questions, and I'm just trying to get to the bottom of who made that decision, and did they consider that they made sense in plain English? Because I think it's a major issue in terms of the consultation process.
Thank you. Please. If the Chief Executives could answer the question.
So I can try and help. Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is that the language, not the questions, but the language did come through a full council report. And so it's very similar, if not identical, language that came forward when the report was considered here. But that's not the same as to say that the full council signed off those to be the questions. I looked to colleagues at the back, but I think confirmation will come in terms of the nature of the consultation. Obviously was signed off in effect by the working group. I think anybody looking at it could absolutely reasonably say, could it have been in plainer English? Yes, of course it could have been. And that's part and parcel of why the council took Cllr opinion as to was the language sufficiently clear to be able to be a robust consultation. And the advice that we were given from Cllr is that yes, that was the view, that it was sufficiently clear, but that is not the same to say as to say could it be clearer. And I believe the report from the working group looked at that, and it's set out within their documents in terms of could they consider the responses that are received, and obviously had numerous responses. Did that demonstrate some degree of robustness, i.e. did several people clearly understand it And I believe, without putting words into the mouth of the working group, that their view was that, yes, clearly lots of people did understand it as validated by the nature of their responses back. But I think it'd probably still be reasonable to say, is there an individual out there who might have been confused by it? I suspect probably yes.
Okay, one more question, please, from Councillor Carter.
One question. Okay, I had a couple, but I guess I have to limit it to one. Because I was going to go back to the access, because understanding access needing to a pathway has to lead us somewhere, and what can you get to and pathway. But anyway, I'm trying to work out the term. So the terminology was that it was a robust review. That the legal answer was it was robust. I'm just trying to work out if the wording was in plain English. What question would the working group refer to if it's a member of their family answering? If they would want it to be that way, how that would reflect on the answers back, and reflecting on the percentage of regards of what percentage of answers may have been different, because I think it was only 7% of Stowmarket answered, and lots of those came back to representatives saying they didn't answer because they didn't understand the questioning, but on the simple one, got a major answer. So I'm trying to work out, it's legal terms being, yes, it could have been better, but this is legal, but was it saying, yes, it could have been better, but it's still robust, it's still a good consultation. I think it's a different, if we could have done better, shouldn't we have done better or mentioned it? But just a question.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. The Chief Executive will answer your question.
I think I heard the question fully. It's difficult. The acoustics are not great, but I think I understood the question. I think there were two parts to it. The first element being, what would people have said were the question had been phrased differently in the consultation papers, to which I'm afraid the obvious answer is, we can't possibly know the answer to that unless that question were phrased in a different way and put back out for consultation. And in answer to the second element, probably the easiest thing is if I quote from Council's opinion. So in Council's view, so in my view, the above options could have been more clearly expressed, but they are sufficiently intelligible to allow for a considered response. So the view is, and the test is not whether they're robust, the test is whether or not enough people understood it. It is down to full council, which is why you've got the different recommendations in front of you, as to whether you think it was sufficiently robust. If you don't, collectively, then clearly the option would be to go back into consultation as per recommendation 4.4, I think it is, from memory, or 3.4, sorry, 3.4. I notice, however, as clarified by Stowmarket this evening, that nobody's actually asking you to do that. So that would be the council asking that of themselves, albeit I know Mr. Blackburn talked about it in terms of the robustness of the consultation. The alternative, as set out in the papers, obviously, is to go with the working group, or the alternative, which is what Stowmarket are asking you for. But yes, it's impossible to speculate what the answers might be had the question been differently phrased. As I said before, the working group was satisfied on your behalf that the questions was clearly understood sufficiently given the nature of responses that they had come back. But, as I said earlier, clearly it could have been expressed in more plain English.
Thank you, Arthur. For balance, I will give one more question to Councillor Higgs, please.
Sorry, I don't mean to make this more difficult for the monitoring officer, but I do have a question. So I'm hearing a lot of people say they're not convinced the consultation went as well as it could have done. The questions may not have been very clear. Lots of people didn't have the opportunity to feed in to the questions that might have been appropriate. My problem with the recommendations, the way they're laid out, is we're being asked to make decisions, and the last one is whether we go out to consultation or not. And by that point, we either will have had a possible yes, a possible no. So I would suggest 3.4 should be the first question. We either go out to consultation again, or then we work through the other three options. But I don't know if that's possible, and no one else may agree. But to me, the option is we either go out to consultation again, or we go for one of the options which delivers A, B, 1, 2, or 3.
Thank you. Monitoring officer to respond.
Chair, at the moment we have the Community Governance Working Group's recommendations on the table, and they're the ones that we need to deal with first. So that's 3.1 and 3.2. If we were then so we're going to take the first 3.1 vote first and then go to the second one. If that is not carried, then we would then move to one of the other options, and it will be for councillors to move one of those options once we've gone through the process of the Community Governance Review Working Group's recommendations. That's what we need to deal with first.
Yes.
But the danger with that is that something's approved when actually people might want to go out to consultation, whereas it's yay or nay or consultation.
So Chairman, if it helps. So if people want to go out to consultation, and if their preference is recommendation 3.4, then they vote no to 3.2.
Yes, but if you sorry, just one more time. I'm not being clear, but if you vote for if 3.4 fails, then I will vote for one of the others, and I will vote differently based on the fact that consultation hasn't failed. But what I'm being asked to do is say yes, no, on the hope that the consultation will go out again. So I think it should be. That's why I think it should be the other way around.
As I say, unfortunately, Councillor, because that motion has been moved and seconded by the Community Governance Working Group, we need to deal with that first.
Chairman. And I don't know if it assists, but I'm not sure whether Councillor Hicks is saying this or not, but certainly it is not the intention that you would vote for 3.2, then move to a vote on 3.3, and then move to a vote on 3.4. It would simply be for somebody to move either 3.3 or 3.4.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on to the debate now. Councillors will be allowed to speak once for 3 minutes, and this will be timed. Who would like to start us off? Councillor Patchett, was that your hand? Sorry, I don't see a hand yet. It's a phantom hand. Councillor Rowe.
Okay, I'll start off. I am kind of not going to vote for the recommendations that the working group put because I haven't had answers about planning, and that seems to be one of the main concerns. And there's the kind of residents of Bramble Close, Moor Road, and Honeysuckle Way and Teasel Way will be disconnected from Stowmarket, and as the thrust of how the community reviews work is to take into account how connected communities are to the rest of their parish, that bit isn't connected, and that is a big concern for me, and so I won't vote for the recommendations by the working group because I haven't had my questions answered, I haven't been provided with enough information, and so it still looks like we're cutting off part of Stowmarket from the rest of Stowmarket for no apparent reason.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting for the recommendations of the work group on the basis that I think they've done a very good job. They've presented a very sound report. I think the putting in motions about the quality of the questions is a bit of a red herring. It is basically a simple yes or no answer. We've had that resoundingly given to us by the percentages in the responses. And I think it's difficult to undermine the hard work the working group has put in fairness and consideration, if we would go against their recommendation. I also respect the people of Onehouse who have bothered to respond. The fact that such a low percentage from Stowmarket didn't is not an issue that we need to consider here. We've been given a resounding wish for the boundary to remain as it is by following the consultation. I don't see what the difficulty is. Thank you.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I actually share a bit of sympathy with Councillor Hicks's view because I think if we are going to go out to consultation, it should be the first decision that we make, but we are where we are. And I'm also somewhat disappointed that Council is being, given the blame for writing those questions. I believe I actually proposed the
thing at full council saying we should go out to consultation. I certainly was not aware that we were going to be using council speak in any questionnaire. I do think it's important that language is accessible. But anyway, we're done and gone now. The consultation has been done. We can't go back. We can't, and I think to send out another one might actually just make it even more complicated. Myself and Councillor Whitehead were actually part of the 2013 review of the boundary when the boundary was moved to incorporate much of the Chiltern Lees development. And I'd like to say some thanks to the late Councillor Melvin, because I think he did a fantastic job of chairing the community review then. And we went to a lot of trouble to ensure that people who were already living in a house were not being moved to another village, town, parish, whatever you want to call it. And we were lucky enough that the houses in Chiltern Lees estate were unoccupied. They weren't even built. So those houses were being built. They were already in Stowmarket. Anyone moving in knew they were moving into Stowmarket. They knew what the precept would be. We were aware that the site on the other side of Union Road was possibly an area for development, but we didn't think it was our place then to be moving the boundary then, because there was nothing in the pipeline. Obviously, time moved on, and we've seemed to have taken an awful long time to have got to where we are. There are a number of people who've moved into those houses, who moved into those houses in good faith, thinking that they were in Onehouse parish and will be paying Onehouse precept. I don't think it's fair to move them into Stowmarket. There's been an awful lot of muddying the water about planning and green boundaries and fields. We're not talking about planning. We're not talking about filling in the space between Onehouse and the Union Road development with houses and calling it Onehouse. That's nothing to do with the boundary review. I spent the first 23 years of my life living about 60 metres from a boundary between two parishes. My postal address was Wickham Bishops, but I lived in Great Totham. Most of the facilities were in Wickham Bishops. Did it matter? No, not really. Most of the time we went to Malden or Witham if we wanted facilities. Of course a village right on the outskirts of a larger town is going to use the facilities within that town. I live in Elmswell. I use the facilities in Stowmarket. Doesn't mean I want to be part of Stowmarket.
Councillor Mansell, could you wrap up, please?
So I just think there's been an awful lot of muddying the water about planning issues which are not anything to do with the boundary review, and I will be supporting the work of the governance review. I think they've done a good job. They've put a good report together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would like to make the following observations. Both Stowmarket and Onehouse have always supported the green gap between it, and this, I believe, is a crucial point. I really do believe that. And the only way of maintaining a strategic green gap is to support the recommendation that the affected areas A, B, C move to Stowmarket. Otherwise, you no longer have a green gap. We have heard that from Onehouse Parish Council. The Union Road development was a strategic site identified in the Stowmarket Area Action Plan for development, and this was consistently supported by Stowmarket Town Council at every juncture. If anyone looks at the development, they would, I believe, conclude that it naturally feels that it is in the town of Stowmarket. Its very design suggests an urban development. Residents of these houses, I suggest, will look to Stowmarket for services other than the ones that were mentioned, community facilities, doctors, etc. And Stowmarket shouldn't be expected to provide them. I would suggest that the residents actually do have more in common with the town. The footpaths issue has been raised by other councillors, and I think the fact that Onehouse voted against the Union Road planning application on the basis of maintaining the strategic green gap, and against indeed a smaller development in Forest Road on exactly the same basis, which was nearer their own village. Stowmarket supported the Union Road planning application and the allocation in the Area Action Plan. Both of the developers have clearly marketed and sold their sites as Stowmarket, not Onehouse. Previous governance reviews, I think, are also relevant, as they've brought similar developments into Stowmarket and not actually maintained the status quo. I think the really salient point, and I think Councillor Mansell picked that up, is if the review had been carried out before any development had taken place as suggested by the Town Council when they requested it in 2017, we would not have been where we are today, asking residents to move parishes. I think overall my comment would be that the community governance review does not show this council in a very good light, and I personally have very little confidence in the way that it was carried out. I would suggest that the consultation was not robust enough, in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. So look, I love Onehouse. That's why I've just moved there. You know, before I moved there, I would walk the dogs through Chiltern Fields. You go through the hedge, and then you see the fields, and you know you're in Onehouse. And you look over at the woods, and that's Onehouse Woods. You know you're in Onehouse. You look over to the left, I can see Paupers' Graves. I know I'm in Onehouse. And it's those lovely fields, and it's the forests, and it's the woods, and it's great. Now, if I walk down sort of Onehouse Road and see the Union Road estate, I'm in Stowmarket, and I keep walking, and I'm seeing the houses, and it's rolling along, and I think, well, this is Stowmarket to me. It naturally feels like Stowmarket. Just like if I was on the other side, it naturally feels like Onehouse. And I think perhaps we're all looking at this the wrong way, really. Stowmarket isn't land grabbing. They're not trying to sort of steal your land. Think of it as actually they're taking those houses off your hands. They're keeping Onehouse nice. They're keeping it that nice village that I live in and wanted to move to. So Stowmarket taking those houses and those areas, that's almost doing you a favour, because it maintains the green gap that you wanted, that your planning committee wanted to maintain. So, you know, that green gap, if we vote this to be remaining as Onehouse, what is that one gap? Well, it's not a gap, it's a concrete joint. Stowmarket and Onehouse are physically joined by tarmac and bricks and mortar. You know, it's urban, it's an urban development. You know, I live there, I love the village, I want it to be the village. I don't want it to be a branch of Stowmarket. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, you're from Onehouse, your final submission, you said, watch this space. Well, do you know what we will? If we vote this to be remaining Onehouse, we will watch the space, we'll watch the space disappear. There'll be no space. It will be just a branch of Stowmarket. You know, let's just be sensible. What looks like Stowmarket, let's have it at Stowmarket. What looks like Onehouse, let's keep it as Onehouse. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to agree with Councillor Hicks' point, Councillor Rowe, Councillor Scarth and Councillor Patchett. I actually have residences in both locations, in Chiltern Ward and in Onehouse. I received the documentation, and when I came through, I was very confused. I think I have some level of intelligence, but I really did struggle with that, and I was quite worried about older residents that would receive that and how confused they would be. And you know, it was quite baffling actually when we did receive that. You know, the process, I'm concerned about the robustness of the process. Obviously, the full information I don't feel is available. So what, you know, Councillor Rowe was referencing to some of these houses that, you know, they're not built, what the proportion of these houses that are currently empty. But also, I've spoken to a number of people who live in the area, and, you know, not particularly about this, but just as you're sort of generally chatting, and they didn't understand the consultation, they didn't understand the communications, they actually don't understand what's going on. And I have somebody that I know who said, oh, I'm moving to Stowmarket. And where are they moving to? That particular development. Not, I'm moving to Onehouse and they've come from another village themselves. I'm moving to Stowmarket. So it's in their mindset. That's what it's been advertised at. That's what they feel they're moving into. The accessibility points as well from sort of Councillor Carter. So yeah, I've got sort of lists and lists of these things. So that's my points. Thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make a couple of points. Lots been said about how confusing the two sentences were. Agree, if I were being asked to agree these as the wording to go out, I probably wouldn't agree them in this form. Having said that, I think there's been a little bit much made of this, because if you read option 1, there's a little dash and it just says no change. That's quite clear, actually. If you think that's a bit of a word salad to begin with, that's quite clear. No change. I understand that. I think everyone in the room understands no change. You don't understand no change? It means the status quo. Things stays as it is. The second part where it says the area stipulated within the draft recommendations was subsequently be moved into Stowmarket town area. That's actually quite clear. That bit is quite clear. So I think most of the people that responded to the questionnaire did so understanding the question. The trouble is, the question and all the bits that are jumbled up around it are a complete mess. This was always going to be a mess the second another village got put inside the Stowmarket Area Action Plan. Now that had happened before. It happened with Hawley. And it was quite helpful with Hawley, because although Hawley were a bit grabbing some of our land, the land was the other side of the A14. And Hawley looked upon the other side of the A14 as land they used to have, but now will pretty much write that off as being inside Stowmarket. But not so Onehouse, because Onehouse was always promised a green gap. And the problem with that is, this green gap just keeps moving. Which green gap are we talking about? The original green gap that people pay rugby on and all that, that was formed and decided upon in the last review? The boundary we're now looking at here now, I've looked at, it's about 800 years old. The one we're looking at changing today. And there was mention of Councillor Melvin earlier. Boy, do we need someone like him right now. Such a helpful man. Having said that, there was one bit of wisdom that he always used to come out with on planning committees, and sorry he mangled planning into this. If it came to a split decision on a planning committee, Ray Melvin would always vote for the status quo, because that can be appealed against. He would always vote, almost changing his vote, for a change not to happen, because that cannot be changed. So I personally, given all the misgivings about this and all the timings about this, I think I will vote for the recommendation of the review panel and thank them for doing their work. Sorry it was in such confusing and stressful times because things had moved on and it was all in the wrong order. I get that. But equally, it's to preserve that green gap, because what I don't want to see is, if you look at the map, if we approve moving this into the parish of Stowmarket, there's a funny little bit in the middle of this thing called Stowmarket that's now Onehouse that certainly is a green gap.
Councillor Stringer, if we could sum up, please.
I'm nearly my final sentence, sorry, Chair. And I fear that in time that will be formed part of another review and we're back here again, and yet the green gap moves even further. So I will be voting on balance for the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm somewhat conflicted in this. Firstly, there should clearly have been a review done in the before May 2023, and I just think it's a shame that Council at the time didn't get that organised, especially since that request was made in 2017. That's ample time to get a review going. So as a member of Council at that time, albeit not in the administration, I can only apologise to residents that that wasn't sorted out. Secondly, just to clear up the issue about the wording in the recommendation and whether Council did or did not approve it. What Council approved was we approved the draft recommendation in October 2023 that we are asked to decline the request. That's the only bit the wording that we approved, but we didn't approve. This is the exact wording that's going to be in the consultation, and the exact wording for the other side of the argument is going to be this, that, and the other. And I understand the Scrutiny Committee did look at whether we needed to do something to do with plain English in the future for council papers and council work, so hopefully that might come forward and give some help with that. But I also want to kind of pay credit to the working group, because I think we as a council put work to working groups and we ask for volunteers and they do a job, and the job that they do involves lots of meetings, in this case going out to meet people, going to walk around the area doing research. It's not, you know, yes, I know we get an allowance for being councillors, but it's a responsibility going to talk to everybody and get together and actually work that through. And we, as councillors of the whole council, should put our faith in that working group, as we do in other working groups, that we ask to do particular pieces of work through the council term. Fourthly, I think there's lots of issues that have come up within this review, and what I'd really hope is that, you know, I kind of almost hope that someone somewhere is keeping a sort of running tally to say, like, we need to kind of get some work, you know, ensure there's work with Stowmarket and Onehouse to do things, we ensure there's some funding issues that are being worked through, some facilities work that's going on, some accessibility and so on. And that I would hope that after this, whatever the outcome, that work has continued, that goes on or continues, because I'm sure there's plenty of work happening at the moment. And I would say to Onehouse Parish Council and to Stowmarket Town Council, if you want, and you might not after the events of this evening, but if you want any kind of assistance or kind of, you know, observations from councillors in this chamber, I'm sure we will be willing to help with that, or officers, help from officers and so on and so forth. So I think that, you know, I'm kind of sitting on the fence at the moment, because on one hand I think the working group has put forward recommendations that we should be following, in that, you know, that's what we've asked them to do. But in terms of the, you know, the whole, it's quite an intense review in terms of the different areas A, B and C and what they represent and so on and so forth. So I just think
Councillor Eburn, could you sum up?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's a very difficult decision to make, but finally I would really like to thank the Stowmarket Town Council and Onehouse Parish Council representatives for coming today, because in terms of giving what your kind of thoughts to the council, that's been really helpful, and I know there's been a lot of anxiety and work going on in the background in order to meet that, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Linders.
Thank you. Yes, I'm speaking a few words as a member of the working group, and we started off by perusing maps, doing a one-day visit to the site and going through older documents and so forth. And that resulted in a draft recommendation in the autumn last year, and upon that a public consultation was embarked upon. And that included letters sent by surface mail as well, to make it more accessible to everyone, even including people who don't possess computers or smartphones. After that, it has been argued that the questions were hard to understand. We as a group refuted that idea based upon the volume and nature of responses that contradicted that view. So no corrective action should be required based on that. Also, legal advice was sought, and that confirmed that the questions were intelligible and understandable. To emphasize the relatively low level of confusion, if you look at page 43, you can see that only 1.18% voiced complexity as a problem, and the group doesn't understand amounted to 0.59%, so that is not a huge number. And the questions actually, as has been pointed out earlier tonight, they do contain very clear no change or change into the questions. So the double negation in both these options were followed by clarifications that made it very clear to understand. We got 848 responses, turnout 35.79%, and Stowmarket itself produced 7.42% and Onehouse 35.79%, combined 8.72% turnout, which is very high for this kind of consultation. And the outcome, as we know, 73% all over, no change, and 17.33% pro change. And the areas ABC, that would be the areas actually concerned about the proposed change, 100% did not want any change. By parish, nowhere was there a majority for change. In fact, all areas were in favor of no change. And then the final recommendations were based upon incorporating these views. So based on the above, I sincerely hope that you vote in favour of no change to these boundaries.
Councillor Linders, could you summarise, please?
Right,
Thank
okay.
you.
So in summary, if there would be a vote against no change, that would disregard the public opinion as voiced in the consultation, and the people would be given the impression that it does not really matter what I say. And I think that would be a very sad, sad day for local democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Winch?
Yeah, I've got to admit I am a bit conflicted on this debate. The core issue for me, I think, is that we've gone out to public consultation. We've got a result back. Are we saying we're going to ignore that? And I think that depends on whether we believe the confusion over the questions, because I think we have to put our hands up, the questions are confusing. Do we still believe that's a valid public consultation? I am 55-45 in favour because of the legal advice saying that it is just about okay, but it's not a great position to be in, I have to say. But I will be voting in favour of the recommendation of the working group.
Thank you. Councillor Warboys?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. First of all, I was on the working party, so I have got an interest in this. And I think I'd just like to say at this point that the working group, we carried out our examination as objectively as possible. None of us had any connections with Stowmarket nor Onehouse, so it was possible. We were neutral observers, and we walked the ground, as it were. But I'm not going to try to sum up our findings. Councillor Marriott and Councillor Linda, I think, have done an excellent job of presenting those. But listening to the arguments that have been put forward this evening, there's one or two things that come to mind. First of all, I think there's an assumption that a small urban development adjacent to a larger urban, I dare call Stowmarket conurbation, perhaps that's exaggerating things, should be, even though it is in a separate parish, should be subsumed within the greater one. I don't think that's got historically really much precedent. If you go to London, Chelsea, Hampstead, Finchley, we're all separate entities, separate from the city itself. They were green spaces. Now, if you travel that same distance, it's one part of one urban conurbation. Yet each retains its town halls, its traditions, its sense of identity with the spaces. We've talked about the green space. Both councils have agreed on how important that green space is. One council voted to preserve it. The other council, as a planning, voted to put a development on it, which I thought that represents the sort of importance to either council. What struck me on our walk round was the significance of Paupers Field and the workhouse. Historically, the workhouse would have been put outside the parish.
Councillor Warboys, could I ask you to sum up, please?
Oh gosh,
sorry, thank you.
So sorry. Yes. So retaining that historic boundary of Onehouse by the workhouse and Paupers Field is, for me, very significant. I better stop now, haven't I? Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as everyone knows, I actually represent the village of Onehouse, amongst others. And so I think just to briefly help people understand about this business of the gap, there's various parts of gap. There's the land of Paupers Graves itself, and the fields beyond the Chiltern Lace farmhouse driveway, and the fields around Paupers Graves, and as you've heard from Mrs. Coppin, one of those fields is likely to be given to the parish to look after also. And Councillor Eburn, Councillor Eburn, I think, mentioned Councillor Melvin's view. No, whoever it was said it anyway, that he had said we must maintain a status quo when he was using his casting vote. Now, it so happens that one of the other parts of the gap was the land of Bloor development, and that was to be reviewed when the Stowmarket Area Action Plan was reviewed, which didn't happen. But unfortunately, when that proposal came to the Planning Committee, the chair of the day used her vote, her casting vote, in the event of the tie that there was, to actually go ahead with the development. So it's a pity that Councillor Melvin wasn't still with us, because we'd have kept that part of the gap. Now, just one briefly bit of understanding that the recommendations on page 2728, number 5, talk about the connectivities of the areas, and the connectivity of the new developments to Area C has been eliminated by the Hopkins development for the last several years since they started building it. And they were supposed to open it up again after a year, and they haven't. So actually that would strengthen the argument of the working group. That connectivity will be restored one of these days soon. And as a matter of fact, after some huffing and puffing, I did persuade Bloor to put a connection through their site, which will also improve the connectivity between areas B and C. So I'm pleased about that. Just briefly to say that the unfinished and unsuccessful previous working group in 2022 that's mentioned in the report, that did actually, a different group of people did actually reach the same conclusion as the new working group, that things should remain the same. So I would like to just ask members to support the recommendations of our current working group and thank them for their work.
Thank you. Councillor Wilshire.
Thank you, Chair. I think the real travesty here was the original planning application that put the houses there in the first place, and we wouldn't be in this situation to discussing about the boundaries, etc. That was a marathon that day. I was previously on Onehouse Parish Council and lived there for many years, and been actively involved in place-shaping meetings with Taylor Wimpey around the entire estate. And one of the reasons for the objections around the additional housing on Union Road was because over 1,000 houses had already been agreed and put in place, and we looked at how they would shape and maintain the aesthetics and the differences and the gap between the two areas. Whereas these ones never engaged in that level of place shaping, which is what caused a lot of the issues in the first place. But we are where we are, and we've got to live with what we've got, and we have to move forward. And people forget that the parish of Onehouse is more than just the group of houses near the community centre. It envelops, Stowmarket Golf Club. Oh, that's in Onehouse. That's where their address is. And other places that are associated that overlap with the parishes. And I have a concern that there needs to be more collaboration and more place shaping rather than it's mine, it's yours. And lastly, I would like to thank the working party. It hasn't been easy, it has been messy. There are questions around credibility and questions and all of those things. And I have a concern that if we, it would have more, it would impact our credibility even more if we fly in the face of showing faith and respect to the public opinion in result to the consultation and our own working party. So I would like to fully recommend the recommendations from the Working Party and thank them for all of their hard work.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Now, would you believe that in Stowmarket, to the average Stowmartian, that the District Council has quite a, well, they have quite a low opinion of it. It's not as seen as trustworthy, not seen as be able to accessible to contact. So when things go wrong, they tend to turn to the town council answers. Now, I'll go back to this in a moment, but we've spoken about fairness and fairness to people living there. Where was the fairness when this wasn't addressed, when it was first put out there in 2017? Because if it was fairness, it's unfair to the people who originally put it out for addressing. It's unfair for the development to be moved there, and unfair that people have moved there now, that we are in this situation we are now. It's not about fairness. We are where we are. We now have to sort it. Fairness and also understandability, the understandability of a question. Now, when you actually understand people and how the people actually function, it may be a question and you read through it, the first one, but if you have somebody with a learning disability, if you have somebody with a neurodiversity like myself, if you have, which these are people who are entitled to vote, entitled to have their opinions, but when you get to a part and go, to disagree to decline, I can't even say the word. Well, with me and my neurodiversity, I see that and computer says no. I get no further. Don't even bother reading further. Had to, didn't want to. Many people didn't. They went to people they trusted. They went to the town council and went, what is this? I don't understand it. And so the town council had said, there's an issue here, but of course, it's not being addressed because they're not themselves going to a district council. They take it no further, they go to the body they trust. Now, as an individual, going back to accessibility, individual with disability, this is a new development with a new expectation they should be able to get somewhere. Yet, if somebody moved there and they see it as a new, well-developed thing, where can they get to in Onehouse? There's a pathway that goes to nowhere. You can't get into the community centre because legally, on a pavement scooter, driving on the road to get there, you're not supposed to. People may do. I wouldn't risk it. Battery dies, who's going to rescue you, get you out there? It's a safety issue. Can't get to the pub, same reason. Pathway goes nowhere, you can't get there. Can't even get to the polling thing. And again, these are people who have a right to vote, but you can't even get to your local polling booth. Whereas where in Stowmarket you get everywhere. So we're talking about fairness. We're fairness people moving.
Councillor Carter, could you summarise, please? Thank you.
Okay. Wouldn't want another consultation. We are where we are. Could have done better. Should have done better. And I certainly won't be supporting somewhere if it's going to be somebody moving in there, if they're going to be worse off moving there because they can't actually, regardless of how cheap they're paying, if they're not getting anything for what they're paying. Money's going nowhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Mansell said a couple of hours ago, I was on the... not by 3 minutes. I was on the 2014 working party with her and three people who are councillors no longer here. And at that time, we looked at several sites, but one of them was this area. And at the time, there were houses that were built, and then there was a green area. And as Councillor Mansell said, the houses that were built, none of those were moved. But we did move the boundary, and as part of that review, the question was, where should we move the boundary to? And we walked the sites, and we looked at maps, and we were told by the officers at the time, you've got to look for a natural boundary. And within the area, which was all green at the time, there was a hedge. That was a natural boundary. So people said, let's make the boundary on this hedge. Now, I was aware of the Stowmarket Area Action Plan and the housing allocations beyond that, and I sort of raised the point that although the hedge was there then, when the new houses were all built as per the developing plan, that hedge will have gone. There'll be housing right and left of the hedge. That was not the right place to put the boundary, but I was at one voice out of 5. If I'd been listened to, maybe now we'd all been home by that time, but at the time we said, well, that's a problem for the future. We've got to find a natural boundary in this green area, that's draw the line. So unfortunately, the line was drawn there, and I think it was drawn in the wrong place. If it had been drawn where I think it was, it might not have had been this issue. I totally agree with the points that Councillor Paget and Councillor Carter have made in terms of what is the reality of the people who live on the ground. I think if I bumped into a resident of one of the new houses in this one house, new houses, I said to them, oh, where do you come from? Would they say to me, oh, we live in a new one-house housing estate, which is actually beyond the village envelope of one house? And I sort of said, pardon? I think the reality is to say, we live on the edge of Stowmarket. Now, just the vagrancies of Victorian parish boundaries mean that we actually pay our parish precept to Onehouse, but for all intents and purposes, we live in Stowmarket. So from that point of view, I feel very strongly that recommendation 3.3 is the right answer to this question. Where I am a bit conflicted is there are so many other instances like this. For example, there's an estate in Witton Rural in my ward, which to all intents and purposes abounds Ipswich, but is in mid-Suffolk. When all the new houses are built to the east of the A14 in Sproughton, they'll appear to be in Ipswich, but historically they're in Sproughton. And you could go on, I suppose, with Pinewood and all sorts of things in terms of Ipswich. So it sort of opens a can of worms, this whole sort of thing. But I think looking just at the particular
Councillor Whitehead, could you
instances,
summarise, please?
Yeah, looking just at the instances and the realities of what's on the ground, I'm coming down in terms of favouring moving these people to Stowmarket, which is where they sort of believe they live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Overett.
Thank you. I appreciate that there are strong feelings on both sides of this argument. I personally see the loss of the green gap between Onehouse and Stowmarket that many of my colleagues have referred to as yet another loss for the village in relation to this department, because it seems really clear to me that there has been a lot of loss for Onehouse in terms of their rural identity, as well as all the upheaval that has come from this development, the loss of the footpath across the fields, etc. And so I see the argument that the green belt has been taken from you, so the houses should be taken as well, as pretty erroneous. On a separate matter, I am a little confused that a significant part of the Town Council's argument is that the consultation was inadequate, and yet I understand the stated preference is actually for not for a further consultation, but rather to go against the current review outcome. I think my councillor colleagues on the working group have done an extremely thorough job and were chosen because they have no vested interest in this matter. I do respect their conclusions, and I will therefore be supporting the recommendation to make no change to the boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points really from me. I mean, to validate that the language was not accessible, I mean, I run a litter picking group once a month, and when somebody actually brings you the letter and expects you as a councillor to decipher exactly what is meant, I do wonder why people feel so disengaged in politics. But I keep coming back myself to the guidance, and in the guidance under 83 it says boundaries, they need to be easily identifiable with examples given: rivers, roads, railways, parks. Whatever the boundaries are selected, they need to be likely to remain easily identifiable. Point 85, a review of the parish boundaries is an opportunity to put in place strong boundaries, remove anomalous parish boundaries. Councillor Stringer earlier gave a good example of a definitive boundary in the A14. My question here would be, is the strategic gap an example of a good boundary? It would be nice really for us to have had the opportunity to review the options individually, as listening to other councillors here, I believe that possibly the answer to this question lies within looking at them individually. Personally, at the moment, I really am struggling to support the recommendations of the working group, although I do thank them for all of the work that they have done. Conclusion from me really is that I just urge everybody involved in this decision-making process to take into account all of the factors before coming to a final decision. It's crucial that we consider not just the short-term gains, but also the long-term consequences for communities on both sides and their sustainability. To lighten the mood, this process has reminded me of the battles between in The Simpsons TV between Springfield and Shelbyville. And many of you will know that they are portrayed as intense rivals. However, they do actually share quite a lot of similarities. So I hope beyond this, we can move forward unified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lay, for that. Councillor Mellon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's been a really interesting debate. I hope we're coming towards a conclusion of it. I'm very grateful to Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Mansell as members of the previous working group who looked at this. It's really useful to have that kind of information from a few years ago. Unfortunately, this problem is a kind of legacy and a bit of a running sore that we've got to try and sort out. We've got to try and lance this boil and try and solve the problem. I'm very grateful to the working group for the work that they did and have looked at this very carefully. Just to remind everyone, as a district council, we don't have skin in the game here. We don't gain from a decision either way. We are simply administering this process. And all we have here is potential reputational damage for the council if we get it wrong. So we do want to administer this process well, and we want to do it robustly. Was the consultation clear? It wasn't going to win a Plain English award, I have to be fair. Was it clear enough for people to be able to understand and clear enough for a council's opinion to say it was legally okay, if not ideal? The thing is, the requests here from Stowmarket Town Council and Onehouse PC are opposing and can't both be granted. One or the other of you will go away from here disappointed. To my mind, it's very difficult to make the case for transferring homes that have been well established for years, sometimes decades, from one parish to another. So I think areas A and C should definitely, in my mind, stay in Onehouse. The question is about area B, and that's where we already have the boundary running through that new development. And I think you can make the case that the hard boundary, as Councillor Lay just referred to, of Union Road, Starhouse Lane and Finborough Road represents a potentially a new boundary for Stowmarket. And I suppose that's probably where I would come down as some kind of compromise. I'm not really in favour of going out for a new consultation, A, because there'd be a big cost to it, and secondly, I think the answers to the consultation might be affected or coloured by people's perception of the cost of the change, i.e. a change in their council tax bill. I'm very happy that we vote for 3.1. I probably will reluctantly vote for 3.2, but I'm a bit conflicted about it. Thank you, Chair.
Mellon, I would now like to invite Councillor Marriott to give a summary of the CGRWG recommendations, limited to 5 minutes, please.
Over the last year, the current working group has extensively deliberated the community governance matters surrounding Onehouse and Stowmarket. A lengthy, robust and fair process was followed to ensure that all relevant views were represented, which has involved reissuing maps, extending the consultation, monitoring for understanding, obtaining legal advice, and making sure representation was afforded to both the parish and the town. I do feel that the one question in particular wasn't as clear as might have been, but I take the point that I think it was clear enough. And I think the working group, that was the feeling of the working group generally. Our reviews during the consultation and post-consultation periods ensured that the integrity of the consultation was maintained. The results of the survey of Stowmarket and Onehouse residents firmly bolstered that view, with 73% of 848 respondents being in favour of the status quo, i.e. Onehouse residents in the disputed area should remain in Onehouse parish. The recommendations are not only guided by our own analysis in the consultation, but they also take into account the historical context and outcomes of previous community governance reviews, with results illustrating a succession of the previous CGR in 2013-14, where the very same area was contested. Resolutely, we find there's been no justification for a new consultation, nor to move the boundary, as the current local government's arrangement reflect the identities and interests of the communities and are effective and convenient. The working group therefore maintains its recommendations for no change to the Onehouse and the Stowmarket boundary. And I would just add there that I feel that a failure to support our recommendations would severely reflect on the reputation of the council. And if people were calling for another consultation, I would think it was very unlikely that a lot of those people who had replied in the first instance would then feel that it was worth their while responding again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marriott. I would like to, as Chair, thank Councillor Marriott, the Community Governance Review Working Group for all their hard work, public representatives who have attended this evening and put forward their powerful contributions, and officers for answering questions. Obviously, this is a very contentious issue. There are no doubt lessons to be learned in our approach to consultations and communication. I think we all need to take those on board, really. What I would really urge the council to do, perhaps now more than ever, is to think about your decision as objectively as you possibly can. I will now ask the Assistant Manager of Governance to conduct the electronic vote. Just for 3.1, sorry, which is being voted on separately.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress on your app. Councillor Higgs, you're against. Councillor Pratt?
I'm for.
Thank you, members. That is 26 votes for, 3 votes against, and 2 abstentions. So that vote's carried.
Point 2, to make no changes to the local government boundaries between Onehouse Parish Council and Stowmarket Town Council as recommended by the CGR-WG.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Thank you, members. That vote is 21 votes for and 10 votes against.
So that vote's carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I would like to introduce a motion to extend the meeting by until the business is conducted. We'll need to extend the meeting to get through. Show of hands, please, in favour. Okay, that's carried. We will now pause the meeting for 5 minutes. Is that enough? 10 minutes. Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you. We will now resume the meeting. The next item is item 7, MC/24/6, Skills and Innovation Centre at Gateway 14. Councillors, I would like to deal with this item in the open part of the agenda if possible. If you wish to ask questions on the restricted appendices, please can you indicate, and we will then move into a closed session before returning to open session to vote on the recommendations in the report. I would like to invite Councillor Mellon to introduce paper MC/24/6 and to move the recommendations in the report. The recommendations are as follow. 3.3, that Council approves A, the increase of the total cost envelope for the delivery of the Skills and Innovation Centre to a maximum of 18.85 million, noting that the capital costs for this project of 18.171 million, as included and approved in the Council's overall capital programme, has not changed from the Council's earlier decision. B, the use of £10.9 million of reserves from the Gateway 14 Dividend Reserve and Thriving Communities Fund equally, of which 9.4 million will be replenished by Pot B business rates, and the remaining 1.5 million of those reserves being an investment and not being replenished through Pot B business rates income as originally intended. C, a cost to the revenue budget of 0.656 million over the period of 30 years, being the opportunity costs of using reserves to fund this project rather than investing the cash at prevailing interest rates, and which will no longer be funded through the receipt of Pot B business rates income. 3.4, that Council note that the funding of the entire capital programme, including this project, will be subject to review as part of the 2025-2026 budget setting process. Councillor Mellon, would you like to move the recommendation in the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to move those recommendations that you've just read out. I will actually pass over to my colleague, Councillor Winch, who's got much more detail on this. I'm simply proposing those to avoid a conflict of interest because Councillor Winch is one of the company directors. But I'll hand over to him for the detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Hi, so I don't want to rerun the debate on the Skills and Innovation Centre that we had in January, so I'm just really going to concentrate on what was the funding proposal in January and what is the funding proposal now. But just to remind you, the Skills and Innovation Centre, we want it to be a centre for supporting skills development in the area, particularly green skills, a location for innovative and start-up companies, and a general service for the other companies on Gateway 14. So when we came to Council in January, we put forward a proposal that we then had to take to the Freeport Board, and that proposal said the capital cost of this project is 18.171 million, and we were going to fund that with a £6 million seed funding grant, and the rest of the funding was going to come from something called Pot B business rates, which are ring-fence business rates that you can't use for other projects in the community. Because there's a slight wrinkle, because you have to, from a cash flow point of view, you have to pay for the build before you get all the Pot B business rates. There was an internal borrowing cost of 575,000. So it made the total cost envelope back in January 18.75 million. But the whole scheme was going to be funded with the seed funding grant and the Pot B business rates, the capital cost and the interest cost. So the whole thing was going to be funded by that. That was taken to the Freeport Board, and the Freeport Board were very supportive of the project, but wanted us, Mid-Suffolk, to put in £1.5 million of our own money. So just to go through the new funding arrangement, the capital cost of the project hasn't changed. It's still 18.171 million. We're being asked to put, the Pot B business rates will be 10.66 million, so most of it will come from Pot B business rates. We also need to put in just over 1.5 million, 1.512 million. We've also got an internal borrowing charge like we had on the first proposal. It's slightly different because we're using our own money and the time phasing slightly different. So, and it's slightly increased to 656,000. So that means that gets a bit confusing here, but the cost envelope is increased by 100,000 to 18.85. But the significant difference between the two proposals is the council now needs to put in a bit over 2 million, 2.167 million of its own money, which consists of the 1.5 million plus the internal borrowing costs. So those two together come to a bit over 2 million. So just to be 100% clear, the proposal now on the table is that 89% of the project will be paid for from the seed funding grant and from the Pot B business rates. The rest, just over 2 million, will be paid for out of council reserves. One thing I should point out is that we can't just shrink the size of the project because we would still have to put £1.5 million in. We looked at that, but that isn't an option. The other thing I think is worth noting is we've been quite pessimistic on when we get the Pot B business rate, so in terms of the financial phasing of this. To me, the conclusion is when we came into administration about a year ago, in fact, almost exactly a year ago, we had a presentation on some of the projects, because this is a project that we've inherited. And we went through this one, and it had a budget of somewhere between 15 and 20 million, and there were some other issues around the project. And I think we all came out of the briefing thinking, this isn't going to fly. This is probably something that we're going to balk at. We've ended up in a situation where we're getting a very considerable investment in this district, 16.66 million, to develop skills, to bring innovative companies to Gateway 14. And we're having to put in a bit over £2 million of our own money. I think we've got ourselves into a very good position, and I'd recommend that people vote for this. And I'll put one other thing I wanted to say. I just wanted to thank officers for getting us to where we are. In particular to Lee Carvel, who isn't here today, but he's done a great job on keeping on top of all the detail at every stage of this, and there's been a lot of changing detail at various points in the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Winch. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Warboys?
I'd like to second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. We will now move on to questions. Councillors may ask as many questions as they wish. However, they must be relevant to the subject under discussion and must be a question. Who would like to start off? Councillor Lawrence.
I would just like to seek some assurance that we're not going to come back to visit this subject, say, in another 6 months' time and be asked to approve another $500,000 or another $1 million. Because it wasn't long ago when we approved the budget as it is. And so how robust has our research been for Port East, for instance, to suddenly say, no, you've got to supply $1.5 million? Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Winch?
Okay, just to be 100% clear, the capital cost of this project hasn't changed. There hasn't been a change in any base cost. True, the internal borrowing cost has changed, but when our initial proposal, we knew we had to take that through a Freeport board process, and that is of itself a bit unpredictable because we're not in control of the variables. We've now had that process out of the way, and we've got a realistic budget for the project, so I'm not expecting us to be coming back. That's all.
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. Just like some clarification in terms of what we're voting on tonight, because this report's coming to full council now, and in 1.3, which is on page 115, it reads, "This paper recommends a preferred revised funding strategy to address the gap in funding. If approved, this will enable the project to proceed." So that's what we're voting on tonight. There's a media announcement by Mid-Suffolk dated the 15th of May, which says, headed funding of 18.8 million has been agreed to create a skills and innovation centre at Gateway 14. So I'm confused. Was this ahead of its time, or what is the situation?
I believe that must have come out of the Cabinet meeting, not full council. So I take the point. That must have come out of the Cabinet meeting. And it's for us to approve today. Clearly, the project can't go ahead unless we approve this, because we have got a gap in the funding from the previous time we came round this loop. Yeah, I think it is the Cabinet.
Sorry, no other questions? Okay. So I would now like to move to debate, please. Each councillor can speak once for 3 minutes, and this will be timed. Who would like to start the debate? Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I apologise? I should have mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that I have I'm a director of Gateway 14 Limited. I didn't mention that at the beginning. I was too wrapped up in boundary changes in Stowmarket. So with that out of the way, I just want to thank a few more people. Really interesting paper, and I think it's a real testament to our officers and to our representative on the Freeport board that we've got this deal to where it's now got to. Already on this site, this council's won Deal of the Year for one of the deals on this site. I'll actually put forward one of our councillors if this comes off, as this could be the potential deal of next year. Because I think if we can get this to hold the line, will be an incredibly good deal for this council. And I'll be voting for this and hope we can get this through as quickly as possible so we can buy now while governments last. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mellon.
Thank you, Chair. I hate to contradict my learned colleague here, but I think it was actually Emily who won the... Not the council. So congratulations for that deal. Yes, I mean, this is, I think, a good story, although we've had to put our hands in our pocket for some of the money. Overall, we've got 84% of the funding for this new facility. And I think that's a remarkable result, really, and certainly not what we expected sort of a year ago. So, as Councillor Stringer said, Councillor Eburn and Lee and Emily and others who've worked on this proposal and got it to where it is now, very grateful to them. I'll certainly be voting for this, and we look forward to seeing spades in the ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davies, then Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to also thank everybody involved in moving this forward, and it's clearly brilliant news that we have such an investment coming now into our district, which is going to help skill our people and our businesses for the future, because we desperately need to reskill our professionals. So it's really brilliant news, and I warmly congratulate everybody involved in moving this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, equally too, congratulations to everyone. I mean, I think this is really, really exciting. And if you think about what the actual cost to the council is over those period of time, it is an extremely good investment for the district, for its people, and will undoubtedly provide some of the skills that we need to equip ourselves and equip our residents and our younger people with the skills that they need for the future. So this is a really good deal.
Councillor Warboys. Yes.
Benefit. It is an investment in the community. It is an investment in the future of our residents. We've attracted huge amounts of money from external sources. And yes, the council is being expected to make up the shortfall. And to my mind, this is what the council should be doing. It should be investing in our communities. It should be investing in the future of our residents. And it should be developing prosperity. yes, there are some uncertainties. And there may be, like all projects, there may be extra costs along the way. But I think the council should, at this stage, because of the efficiency with which this has been put together and the comprehensive nature of the proposition, I think we should be confident that we could meet those challenges in the future. So I'm supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mellon, do you have anything to add? Oh, sorry, Councillor Eburn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't want to go back over the arguments, as it were, that were at the previous council when this was agreed, but I do want to reiterate thanks to officers who worked on this, particularly, as my colleague has said, Lee Carvel, who's done a huge amount of work. And just to kind of reiterate that when we took on the administration of this council last May, we did go through this with a fine-tooth comb, as my councillor colleague mentioned, we did balk at the costs and asked officers to kind of really work through trying to actually see how we could change that funding balance, as it were. And I'm so pleased that rather than borrowing huge sums of money at great level of interest rates and incurring big liability and interest rates for the council over the next 30 years, we've been able to fund it in the majority of it, 89%, through the so-called Pot B business rates and the seed capital funding from government. And just to again reiterate, it's quite complex the way Gateway 14 works, but there are three different areas of, when business rates come in, they go into three different pots. And one of those, so-called Pot A, is solely for the use of, at Mid-Suffolk's discretion for benefit to the community, whereas the Pot B, which we're referring to, can only be used on the Gateway 14 site. And therefore, this is a perfect example of what that funding should be used for. So I'm really pleased to support this recommendation and think that it's been great work that's been done. And again, I really thank the officers for their hard work on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. Does anybody else have anything to add? Councillor Matheson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I didn't actually want to add to the debate. I just wanted to make sure with the monitoring officer that those of us that are directors of the holding company which owns the Gateway 14 are okay to vote, and probably should have declared an interest several hours ago.
Yes, thank you, Chair. All members or board members for the council's companies have dispensation granted to them, and which lasts throughout your term of office.
Oh, thank you.
If Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I just, it looks, a great report, and it's a fantastic facility that is going to be there. I was just going to sort of reiterate what Councillor Lawrence was sort of mentioning about the figures. And I've mentioned this in some other sort of meetings before about comparative sort of costs, so we can actually see, exactly where it was before and where it is now, and actually sort of forecasts forward. If you can't quite see sort of like for likes sort of next to each other, it's very difficult to see any future sort of issues coming up. So from a financial point of view, personally, it would be great to see some extra information in there, even though there's obviously quite a lot here, but that would be my point for future, if that's okay.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. In that case, Councillor Mellon or Councillor Widge, would you like to add anything at all?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for all the contributions to the debate. I realise this is kind of a technical sort of tidying up in terms of making sure all the sums add up and we've got our funding in place. And it's a change from what was agreed before, but that's simply because of the Freeport situation and a slightly lower level of funding from them. I still think this is a really good story, and I look forward to the centre being open in the future and making the difference in terms of skills, innovation, and that kind of cluster we want to see on Gateway 14. So I hope everyone will feel able to support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the Assistant Manager Governance to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. You might have to scroll down a little bit to the blue line.
So it's not coming up on my...
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. May I take your vote, please?
4. 4, thank you.
Thank you, members. That is 23 votes for and 1 vote against, so that's carried, Chair.
Number 11. Motions on notice. To consider the motion on notice received from Councillor Weller. Councillor Weller, would you like to move your motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to do so, and members will be delighted to know that the speech of 7 pages that I produced to introduce this, I've commuted to a couple of paragraphs, given the proximity to Horlicks and bedtime. This is a motion which is overdue because we're amongst probably the last councils to want to adopt this position. It relates to a private member's bill that was introduced by Caroline Lucas MP in 2020, and it's now at its second reading in the House of Commons on its passage through Parliament en route to becoming law. Primarily, it updates the Climate Change Act of 2008, which obviously approaching its 16th anniversary. That legislation is, 1, outdated, 2, doesn't reflect some of the advances that we've made in the last 16 years regarding acknowledgement of the climate crisis that we're facing and some of the remedial action that's required in order to address it. So this bill plugs some of the gaps in that legislation and also makes more robust the actions that are required in order to address the concerns that we're facing at the moment. One of the things that I'll draw to members' attention is that the bill has changed its name since this motion was drafted, and that just shows how quickly things move in the world of climate change. When drafting this motion, the bill was called the Climate and Ecology Bill, which is why it's addressed as it is. It's now changed its name to the Climate and Nature Bill. So with that amendment only, I'd invite members to demonstrate their commitment to addressing the climate crisis, and I'm happy to propose the motion as tabled with that one exception and that amendment, and I'd ask for a seconder after I've read it. The human activity is causing irreversible climate change. Carbon literate members will be aware that temperature has increased by 1.2% centigrade above pre-industrial levels and is rising. The natural world has reached crisis point, with many plants and animals threatened with extinction. The UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. The Climate and Nature Bill, currently before the House of Commons, aims to align current UK environmental policy with the need to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. The bill also aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in line with the UK's share of the remaining global carbon budget to give the strongest chance of limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees centigrade. The bill is currently backed by in excess of 180 cross-party MPs and peers and 364 local authorities, although I'm confident that number will have risen, town and parish councils. It has the support of nearly 200 eminent scientists, NGOs, businesses, and many members of the public. The bill would require the UK government to develop a new environmental strategy, which would include delivering a joined-up environmental plan that considers the deeply intertwined crisis of climate and nature. So the motion resolves that
Mid-Suffolk District Council resolves to support, number one, support the Climate and Nature Bill, to inform the local press and media of this decision, to write to local members of Parliament and parliamentary candidates to inform them that this motion has been passed and urge them to sign their support to the Climate and Nature Bill, or thank them for already having done so. And finally, to write to the organisers of the cross-party campaign for Climate and Nature Bill, expressing Mid-Suffolk District Council's support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Elkin. Would you like to speak now?
I'm very happy to second, and I'd like to reserve my right to speak, please.
Thank you. We will now move to debate. Councillors will only be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, and this will be timed. Who would like to start? No? Go on, Councillor Mansell.
Somebody's got to say something. I can't really see any reason why we wouldn't want to support this motion, but I do have concerns that you know, we need to do something now. It says in the papers that we need to reverse and halt nature loss by 2030. That's only 5.5 years away. And the bill requires the UK government to develop a new environmental strategy. Well, with no timescale on that, and with the news tonight, who knows when that's likely to be. But of course I'll be supporting it. I'm just a little bit sceptical about its effect. It could just be another talking shop. We've had these things before. We haven't got long. And you're right. I don't believe there are any human activities on the planet that are not going to cause some sort of climate change. And unless there is a wholesale change of lifestyle for the vast majority of citizens, it's going to be a very tall order. But of course I'll be supporting it and just hope that this time something happens.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will unhesitatingly support this proposal. I feel it's unbelievably overdue, and it's time the government threw its weight behind addressing the climate and the nature crisis seriously.
And Councillor Warboys?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too am sort of really happy to support this, and think it would present the government with a very clear way forward. I find myself a little bit at odds with Councillor Mansell. Yeah, it is 5 a very short space of time, but I thought, you know, what can be done in such a short amount of time? On the 6th of June, we're going to be celebrating D-Day. 4 years before that, in 1940, almost exactly 4 years before that, in 1940, there was Dunkirk. Over 300,000 French and British troops were evacuated. Those 4 years, that was how a government should approach a crisis. And that shows what can be done in 4 years. If this bill does go forward, and it does make the government realise this is a crisis and it needs action, then I'm completely in support of it.
Thank you. Councillor Winch.
Yeah, I'm very strongly in favour of this bill, but I really don't think it's a waste of time, because it creates a framework within it which all government policy then has to conform. And I think it would cause a ripple of changes if this actually went through Parliament. The other thing that's in the bill that hasn't been mentioned is it ties in a thing called a climate assembly, which is like a citizens' assembly, and if more than 66% of that group vote for something, and the Climate Change Committee and the Nature Conservation Committee agree with it, then it has to go through. Parliament doesn't have to agree with it, but it has to be tabled. So I think it's a really good way of bringing in society into this debate, because at the moment we've got a bit of a disconnect with what's going on and what Parliament's doing. So I'm very strongly in favour of this bill.
Councillor Piper.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in essence, I completely support this. Although I would say that in terms of the nature aspects and the threats that nature faces, biodiversity net gain is a crucial part of trying to prevent nature declines. But there are lots of flaws with biodiversity net gain, and I think locally we can do lots in terms of trying to block up some of those flaws in biodiversity net gain, especially in terms of planning and development, and that's something we can do on a district level. And I can go into those in more detail at some other point, but I think we need to really be aware of that, because that's a central part of the government's strategy, biodiversity net gain, but it's got lots and lots of problems with it, and that's something we need to be aware of. Thanks.
Councillor Penny.
I would just like to say that these are the reasons why I am in this room. It's the whole essence of why I agreed to become a Green Party councillor. Anything that hastens a process towards saving the planet, which is what I think when I wake up in the morning, has got to be a no-brainer for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be supporting this motion, and I think it's particularly heartening that an issue such as this, I hate even to diminish, it seems diminishing it, calling it an issue, but it does have cross-party support amongst MPs, and I really hope that this, in the forthcoming general election, takes a prominent role, all of the areas around this, because it is just so important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I'm supportive of this because, while there are individual actions people can take, it's very clear that there needs to be also kind of strategic approach from national government, and kind of this is a way of kind of we can send that message up from our residents, that kind of not just going, oh, you need to do stuff individually, but also go, we expect the government to be doing stuff, which also filters down to kind of what we as a council can then do, because there'll be some restrictions from national about when we're discussing various things. So I think, yeah, I support it, and it's very relevant to us that this bill is supported.
Councillor Elkin. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patchett. Would you like to speak?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Thanks to Tim and Lucy for sort of bringing this to the council. Same as what Dave Penny was saying, is exactly that. You know, that is why I'm here, to sort of discuss sort of environmental purposes and nature and biodiversity net gain. But you know, it's quite telling from certain members in the chamber how much contempt they actually give this subject, because they didn't have the decency to sort of stay and listen. You know, perhaps they've received a text message from Rishi telling them they've got something more important to do. I don't know.
Councillor Elkin.
I think any of us would argue that the climate and nature crisis are already damaging our economy and our food security, our health and our safety. And the national and international organisations to set up to look at these challenges all say, yes, we've made some good progress, but we're far behind where we need to be. There's still a large delivery gap. Critics of things like this say, well, it's too much, too quickly, it's going to be too expensive. But the UN Emissions Gap report says inadequate progress on climate action to date makes urgent transformation now the only option. So yes, there will be costs, but delay also brings severe economic and human costs at home and abroad through infrastructure damage, lost homes, lost crops, rising food prices, poorer health, and increased risk of global conflict over resources. And every year we don't act at pace, those costs and risks increase more. So the flip side, that was all very gloomy, but the flip side is that the actions that we need to take are actually going to improve our lives and benefit our economy. And Lord Deben has said, fighting the climate crisis, confronting the cost of living crisis, and establishing the UK's economic future all demand the same decisive actions, and he says there's still time to avoid being left behind in the race to gain the advantages of a net zero world. So I've heard from colleagues sort of some concern, will another bill make any difference? We've had bills and motions put before, and I would say that this bill, the Climate and Nature Bill, is the first time we've had an attempt to create a sort of really comprehensive whole government kind of emergency plan that brings together at work on both the climate emissions reduction side of things and the nature recovery side of things. And I think a key thing is it aims for consistency, so it would require all government decisions in areas such as energy or infrastructural planning to consider these things. So I think for me, as a council which is putting the climate and environmental issues at the heart of what we do, I do feel it's important to get behind this. And I think whether it passes as a bill or not, part of the purpose of it is to engage the public, and people are being encouraged to write to their candidates, to encourage them to support it and to see where they stand on these issues. And I think that's probably become even more important this evening. So I hope you will support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elkin. And my apologies because I've... Yes, here. My apologies because I've brought you in before other councillors have had a chance to speak, actually, which is a mistake on my part. So my apologies. Can we hear from Councillor Matheson next, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very, very briefly. The point is it's an emergency, and Councillor Warboys pointed out that it can be done, but you know, if you spend a couple of years thinking up a policy and then another 18 months consulting about it, it's too late. And it's action now, not words and policies. But if this puts a bit more pressure on the next government, then jolly good. But they need to understand emergency. I forget how many hundred councils actually declared an emergency in 2018, 19, whenever. But not enough people are acting like it.
Councillor Lay.
Thank you, Chair. I thoroughly look forward to this landing on the doorsteps of the new MPs as a general election has just been called. Hopefully Suffolk's first Green MP as well. There are 2 points really that I've picked out that I think should go on record tonight. One of them is too many promises for the future and not enough action now. And the second one is it's not when we reach net zero that matters, it is the path that we take. So I will be fully supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief, which is rare for me. Just wanted to give a bit of hope, really, because a lot of this stuff gets very gloomy. And I'm really pleased to see that we're going to put this in front of candidates in this upcoming election. Incredibly important, because there will be candidates say, look, we don't need to worry about this. It's all a hoax. It's all been dreamt up by some megalomaniac. It isn't. We are facing this year a 24% decrease in agricultural production in this country, due only to climate. Not any other factor, not a war or anything else, but due to the nature of our climate changing. And we need to react in a way that brings as many people with us as we possibly can, but also in a way that enriches people's lives. That's not going to be easy. We don't really have a blueprint, a fully agreed blueprint yet, but we need to march on. I just want to use one example of how there is a bit of hope, but it took a long time. I remember being a very new and naive member of the planning committee and moving that if we approve this barn conversion, that we should put a bat box on it. And that was seen as so radical that I got my picture in a publication next door to Peter Tatchell, which was quite remarkable. I haven't met him actually, but first I was with him in print in this magazine saying, what this radical thing this green man's done in Suffolk. The fact that we now have as policy that every single planning application should demonstrate biodiversity net gain is a huge move. It's probably a bit late. And also some of the details are a bit sketchy, but it just shows you how far you can move if there is the will to do it. I'll certainly be voting for this, and to make sure that all of those candidates in this upcoming election make sure that they agree with this and have a plan for this, and also, in the words of our leader, become good ancestors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Weller, would you like to say anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the wholehearted support of members as part of the debate. I'll just come to a couple of points that they have made, and I'll address Councillor Mansell's point regarding the timeliness of the bill. Obviously, its passage through Parliament by default will mean that it won't become an Act of Parliament. If it does, let's just assume that it does for the time being, for some many months actually. Yeah. However, I think it's important that once it does become, let's just to say, assume that it does become an Act of Parliament, provisions will be contained in it for the Assembly, which it creates, as Councillor Winch kindly reminded us, to make specific provision for the timeliness of actions arising from that strategy. And I'm sure it would be appropriate, and it will happen, that Assembly will arrive at an action plan for Parliament to consider. Coming to Councillor Winch's point, I know he makes it very validly, because I think he heard me say it in the meeting just before, which is that this will provide a vehicle. This Act will provide a vehicle for parliamentarians to point at, to say this is why we need to consider these factors in legislation other than that that's directed directly towards climate, the climate emergency, because this should be a sort of a golden thread that weaves its way through all legislation that's enacted from this time forward, and already should have been, but never too late to include it in future legislation. I think that's the kind of the emphasis behind it. Completely agree with Councillor Penny, and completely echo his sentiments around our raison d'etre as a party and this reflecting it. Certainly as a Green administration, it would be nuts if we weren't signed up to this. I think Councillor Rowe's point in relation to the strategic nature of this bill, when it becomes an act, is really critical in the points that he's making around the trickle-down effect from government to all tiers of local government, and hopefully we'll see the realisation of that in due course as well, in terms of the requirements placed on us as a local authority. Hopefully there will be requirements as opposed to recommendations which we have at the moment. And I'll just finally turn to, well, with the exception of thanking Councillor Elkin for the research that she did in preparation for today, I'll just turn finally to Councillor Patchett and his remarks around members opposite not hanging around for this. But I'm absolutely content that some of the members opposite will be consulting with Peter Bottomley, Roger Gale, Derek Thomas and Lisa Cameron, who are all signatories to this, all Conservatives also, in terms of making some suggestions to them about why it is that more of their colleagues haven't got behind it, and encouraging them to do so before the next election. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Weller. I have to say, personally, that I agree with so many of the sentiments that are expressed in the chamber. I know for a fact that for many of us, this is one of the reasons we wanted to become a councillor, because we wanted to make a difference in these key areas. And I may even be, I'm sure I'm speaking for councillors on both sides of the chamber here, or at least that this is something that nearly every councillor will care about very much. The fact that this is not so controversial anymore does show how far we have come, but we do have a lot further to go. We only have to sort of acknowledge that climate change is actually here and now. It's real, it's part of our daily experiences. The rainfall we've experienced has been, the likelihood of that happening has increased due to climate change and the warming of the atmosphere. And we are one of the most biodiversity or nature depleted countries in the world. What we need is action to be at the very centre, or to at least be a central strand of everything that public servants and public bodies do in order to combat this. I think that we have to remain optimistic, and we've got good reasons to be optimistic, because if we are not, then we're kind of accepting the consequences that we don't really want to see happen. So optimism must prevail. Anyway, without any further word from me, I will now ask the Assistant Manager Governance to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress.
So it's not coming up for me again.
Sorry, Councillor Merritt, may I take your vote, please?
In favour.
Oh. Thank you, members. That is 22 votes for and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
Thank you very much. Just please note that the next meeting, was on the Thursday, the 27th of June. This may change, I suppose, subject to recent news, but that's what's in the diary at 5:30 p.m, but that may change. I would like to declare this meeting closed at 9:04.